The Venezuelan gang Tren De Aragua has been spreading across the United States. You'll recall gang members seized an entire apartment building in Aurora, Colorado last year.
TDA, as it's commonly known, has been causing trouble in several U.S. cities.
A new report out from the Heritage Foundation chronicles the criminal organization's rise from a prison gang to a violent criminal enterprise with ties to the Venezuelan government.
And here to discuss with us is Lora Ries, the Director of Border Security and Immigration Centre at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome, Lora.
Having me on.
So just to start us off here, obviously the issue of cartels, criminal gangs and so forth is a big issue generally. What makes Tren De Aragua special, for want of a better term?
Well, it's a few different factors. One, this is not a gang that the U.S. was familiar with before the Biden-Harris administration. We were much more familiar with other gangs like MS-13, et cetera. And so this is a new phenomena for the U.S. They are also extremely violent. There have been known cases, in addition to the Aurora apartment complex videos that you mentioned, Lake and Riley's convicted killer, Jose Ibarra, was a known member of TDA, as was his brother. Other crimes in New York, just a very violent group. And it goes back to the open borders that the Biden-Harris administration created. And now this gang is in at least 20 states. And it is very important that this gang be towards the top of the list for the mass deportations that need to occur once Trump comes in back to the White House.
Can you tell us how organized is this group? Does it have a top-down leadership structure? When people with ties to it or membership in it in the United States and U.S. cities are committing crimes, how did they become involved with it? Is it more, it's the way they identify and it's not directed by some kind of leadership, or is it, more formal in terms of how they become involved in it?
Well, this is something, as you said, that started in the prisons in Venezuela, and there does seem to be evidence that the Venezuelan government intentionally released many people from their prisons, including gang members. Combine that with programs that the Biden-Harris administration has created to allow them in, and then we see these gangs move into cities and localities like Aurora. They start in pre-established Venezuelan communities, migrant communities. They start with crimes there, like it could be hijacking, it could be armed robbery, it could be shoplifting, and they spread out from there in terms of their influence and as well as the violence and just taking control over buildings, neighborhoods, etc. So it is very networked, but it does seem to have the implicit backing from the Venezuelan leadership as another tool to use to destabilize the U.S.
Lora, I know you were putting a considerable amount of the blame on President Biden's immigration policies there, and I think you said something to the effect that this springs from or is rooted in that policy. But I mean, I read the report and it talks in the broader terms about the fact that, one of the issues is about 8 million Venezuelans have fled the Maduro government. So, I mean, isn't the problem here more broad than just the Biden administration? I note, for example, that the report talks about how the difficulty in distinguishing, this is a quote, distinguishing Tren De Aragua from regular Venezuelan migrants is, quote, a real conundrum for U.S. law enforcement. So, I mean, that's not all on Biden, right? That is a genuine difficulty in making that distinguishment, no?
Well, it's a couple of factors. One, when you open your border and allow millions of illegal aliens from anywhere in the world to come into the U.S., then bad elements are going to exploit that, including Maduro sent, Venezuelans and gang members. In addition to that, the Biden administration has created mass parole programs for Venezuelans and other nationalities, allowing 30,000 to be paroled each month into the U.S. And so the border agents have been so overwhelmed by the volumes of people, we aren't able to vet really anybody, including gang members. And so, yes, they've had to rely on, known tattoo symbols or acquaintances. But when you overwhelm the system with high volumes of people from everywhere, it makes it that much more difficult to find the criminal elements that inevitably exploit that large flow of people.
Yeah, and just to clarify, because I think people who don't follow this issue wouldn't necessarily know all the terminology here. When you're referring to parole, you're referring to the Biden program that gives 30,000 people per month from 4 nations, including Venezuela, essentially the right to come here. Is that correct?
That's right. In the Immigration and Nationality Act, there's something called it's immigration parole. So I don't want to confuse it with, criminal parole from prison. Immigration parole was intended to be rarely used on a temporary basis, on a case-by-case basis, for someone who doesn't have time to get a visa, but needs to come here for urgent humanitarian need, like emergency surgery, or something in the national public interest, like testifying in her criminal case. But what Secretary Mayorkas of Department of Homeland Security has done is mass paroled tens of thousands of people into the U.S. each month, which has not been temporary. It is not case by case, and it's certainly not for urgent humanitarian needs or significant public interest. These people have time to get a visa, but this administration is abusing the statute and giving it to nationals from Venezuela as well as other countries.
Speaking of abuse aspects of the immigration process, of course, the asylum system has become so overwhelmed because that is the easiest and fastest way for illegal immigrants to enter the country and then get some court date set and then remain here while that is pending. And you have to just claim asylum, and it is very easy to do so, easier to take that route than the legal immigration route. What can, talking about solutions now, President Trump is taking office, has a mandate, clearly has the support of the public, vast majority of the public, to do something about the immigration system. What do you expect to see from him? What would you like to see to fix some of these problems?
Yeah, it's terrible that asylum has been so defrauded. One involves actually securing the border, not doing catch and release. The Remain in Mexico program during Trump's first term was very successful in this regard. It stopped the caravans of people from coming through Central America to the U.S. because they knew no longer could they just say a few words of fear and then disappear into the U.S. Also, having asylum cooperative agreements with Central American countries to enforce the notion that if you are truly fleeing for your life, you should be applying for asylum protection in the first safe country in which you enter, not country shop just to get to the U.S. But also, we have backlogs of millions of cases in the immigration court system, and the immigration judges need tools to quickly dispense of frivolous asylum cases and other types of attempts of fraud to get that backlog down, and then no longer would simply filing an asylum application buy years here for illegal aliens, which they know, and it's one of the reasons that they file applications. It's to buy more time here.
Would more immigration judges work as well as additional tools? I mean, because I think that is something that it has been difficult to obtain funding for from Congress, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the Congress is going to need to give considerable resources to interior enforcement, and that includes removal proceedings, which involves immigration judges as well as ICE trial attorneys. But it's not just a matter of more judges. They need the tools to kind of like summary judgment, and that is, even if these facts were true, you don't meet the threshold, you're not eligible for asylum, and so we're going to dismiss these cases. Right now, there are 3.7 million cases pending in the immigration court system. When Joe Biden came into office, that was 1.2 million. And then there's another 9.2 million cases pending over at the Department of Homeland Security. So Unfortunately, there's a lot of fraud in there, and the people that suffer are the truly persecuted, whose case is buried among these millions of cases. So both of those backlogs need to be tackled.
Lora Ries of the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.